Okay, everybody, it's 4 o'clock. Thank you. I'd like to call this study session for the Yuma Union High School District number 70 to order. Thank you for being here. Could you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence? Would you mind? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Oh, that's the wrong one. Okay, we have this study session for the trust policies. Mr. Brienza.
Thank you, Board President. This is our second study session of 4, I believe, as we transition to the trust policies that we bring recommendations to the governing board for a study session and then followed by a first read in the following board meeting today. And just a reminder that these board policies will take effect for the trust on July 1st, 2025. One thing to keep in mind as you look at all these policies is they're all based on state law, federal law, our best practices. So as you look at the policies, the verbiage may be changed a little bit if you compare them to ASBA, but the overall spirit of them or the actual legal terms used in them are identical because policies are essentially based on state and federal law. So they may seem similar at times, but once again, we're moving from ASBA to the trust. So it's kind of like driving a car. You have your Fords and your Chevys. The cars work the same. It's just a different model. So you still have your gas pedal, your brakes. I'm not going to go into the engine because I'll get a little lost as a former history teacher. But it's the same idea with policies. All the inner workings are the same. It's just maybe a different brand. But at the same time, we do have a lot of people here this evening who've worked diligently over the last 4 weeks, analyzing each policy, giving their recommendations of what needs to change on the trust recommendations. And I'd be remiss not to call out Associate Superintendent Diane Cordery and her admin executive assistant, Ms. Sinclair. What's that? Oh, we had one clap? Wow, that's one more than normal. So congratulations, Diane.
That's the one?
Yeah, no, actually. I should clap as well. My budget is down.
We'll all clap. How about that?
they have, yes, exactly. They have done an amazing job so far and continue doing an amazing job. We spent 5 hours almost this morning looking at policies for next study session, which will be in November. So a lot of work goes into that, but without any further ado from me, I'm going to turn over to Diane, Ms. Cordery, so she can talk about today.
So you can tell by the huge crowd that we have here, this is my favorite topic, finance. But finance, when the trust put together their policies, they do it by chapter, and that includes most of the operations. So that's why you have the folks here that have all worked on this, and they're all a part of this actual chapter. So like we did last month for the folks that were here, I will just do highlights. I'm going to do a highlight from each area of what changes or what has happened. You all have had the policies ahead of time, and it's 130 pages, and I know nobody wants me to go page by page because we've done that for 5 hours this morning, and it's very painful. But know that the process has been that I personally have met with each of the directors, executive directors. They've met with their teams. Then they all met with our cabinet to go over the policies again. And so these have been vetted, four times by the time they get to you, and to make sure that they align with what we're currently doing. And then if there are any changes, then we bring that to you if there's anything. So we're not trying to sneak anything by you, just trying to make sure they match and let you know if there are any changes different than what we're doing. But again, effective July 1st. So our policies that we have now remain in effect. So first of all, Ron, I just want to say I'm sorry it wasn't a standing ovation. Yeah, okay. See when I get to transportation. Anyway, I'm just kidding. So the first, first and probably in my opinion, the biggest change that we have is a fund balance policy that we don't currently have right now, but it's the big move right now with a lot of the finance folks in the state and probably even the country. But the idea is now that we've had COVID funds and things that have carried over and people are having higher balances, districts rather, not people, having higher balances in their carryover, they want to dig into what that carryover is, what its intended use is for. As you know, we have carried a large balance in the past only because we're building Somerton High School, and now we're starting to use those funds and we see them go down. So the policy that especially it gets into when you do bonding, it's important that we let our taxpayers know and the people that are buying the bonds, they want to know what the use is for those funds. So that's when it becomes very important. The recommended by the Auditor General, this is a policy that's recommended by the Auditor General. Ours is M&O. The goal is to maintain $10 million in contingency, just so you know. As you will see, I believe later tonight, I think we're more like 39 million right now, but we never want to get below that 10 million. And if we do, we have 3 years to build that back up, is the way that the policy is currently written. Question?
Oh, yes. I was just going to ask about the $10 million in contingency. How do we determine that amount?
Let me tell you. So the recommended goal would be 10 to 15% of our total unrestricted, unassigned operating expenditures. And so we're right at 100 million. So that's where that 10 million would come from.
So we can only spend it on M&O, not anywhere else?
This is, we have the ability in our budgeting to move it to capital,
Okay,
or we can move capital funds to M&O when we do budget revisions.
without getting off the policy?
Yes, yes. So that's probably the biggest in the finance area. That's our biggest change that we have. So moving on, and that is just in case you want to go look it up because you can't sleep tonight. It's policy 3101.01. And then, and you don't need to necessarily follow along unless you just really want to, but I will tell you the policies just in case, just for reference of what I'm talking about. So policy 3109 has to do with our procurement department. Yes.
I just want to remind people that the policy, as we talk about numbers now, our current ASBA policies utilize letters, and now you'll hear numbers.
Yes.
So if you're wondering why we're going from letters to numbers, it's because the trust is using a number system versus ASBA has a letter system.
And the first number is always the chapter. So we're talking about chapter 3 right now. So it's chapter 3, 101 or 109. Okay, so the next one is in our procurement department. And this is something that the board approved last year, I believe it was. So we updated the limit that we can do our job order contracting. It used to be a cap of $1 million, and the board approved for that to be moved to $2 million. And so that's one of the key things that we had to make sure that was an option that we had when we established the current policies that we're talking about right now, is we could change that to $2 million. And so we
So
did.
is this one of those instances where you had mentioned you were doing work beforehand to see if we had to change the trust policies?
Mhm.
So when we do have to change those trust policies, does it have to go back through legal?
Yes.
We don't just get to willy-nilly put them in there?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Somebody's telling us, we can make the recommendations to make the change, but then this all goes through legal and they tell us, nope, you can't take that out. That's
So-
state policy or state ARS or federal
Right.
laws.
So everything that's presented in this board
Has gone through
book has
attorneys.
gone through.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And sometimes they do tell us no.
So the policies originally go through legal. We go through them, look at them, suggest changes, cross things out, and then it goes to legal again. And it's the trust legal. And they say, yes, that's okay, or no, per ARS or per federal law or whatever the case may be, you need to have that in there, even though it doesn't apply, even though you don't utilize it that way in your district, it needs to be there because that's federal law or state law. So there is that dialogue back and forth. So things presented to the board for our first read and even a second read later have all been vetted through the trust legal to make sure that we're in compliance there.
Thank you.
I also have a question on the governing board approval for the procurements. It says that we, the governing board, should approve all procurements of 100,000 or more. Then we delegate and give the authority to the superintendent to approve all procurements under the $100,000 threshold. So once we approve it, it can go ahead and use the 100,000 as they wish. Okay.
Well, not as they wish,
I mean,
but as they,
Under the guidelines.
yes. I just have to clarify because,
Immediately.
I do appreciate that, Carlos. I wish I could use that money however I wish, but we are a very sound fiscal situation, and I don't know if the executive director, Duran, wants to cover maybe just the procurement on what happens with quotes and when we reach over $100,000 and how that may look. So the governing board and the public know that it is at $100,000, but or more for the governing board. But if we have quotes and we spend more than $100,000 as a district, what does that look like? Do you want to quickly cover that? Oh yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much, and good night, and hope everybody's doing well tonight. Yes, everything over $100,000 has to go through a bid process. So once we go through the bid process, then it comes through bids. We select the committee, and the committee reviews the bids, and once they review the bids, then they come up with the awarded bid. Then it comes to the board, then the board approves it. But anything over $100,000, between $10,000 and $100,000, they have to provide 3 quotes. So once they provide 3 quotes that are advantageous to the district, those are the ones that get approved. Doesn't have to be necessarily the one with the lowest quote, but it has to be advantageous to the district. So that's very clear.
and it has to be like items
Like
that they're,
items. Yep,
they're bidding on.
Absolutely. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along. So policy 3202.8 is regarding our facility use agreements that we have. And we had to we've taken this to the board before about what our rental fees are, our rates with that. And so we had to take the time to match those up. Those are, they're not copyrighted by the trust because they're unique to our district. And so that was one of the, not changes, but one of the updates that we did to that policy. Policy 3301 is food service. So one of the options that we were presented with is if we wanted to provide meals to community members over 60 that are over the age of 60 and their spouses. We opted not to do that. We don't have the resources, the staff, so many things to do that, but that would have been an option for probably another school district if that's something that they're capable of doing, just not something that Ms. Hildreth and we all thought as a district was something that we were ready to take on. Policy 3302 is transportation. Ron. So in this is also one of the unique things to our district is the 2-mile radius walkout. So again, radius, not a 2-mile path, not on Google how you can walk. It is radius. So as the crow flies, as they say, which is something that's kind of been confusing to parents in the past. So your child may actually have to walk more than 2 miles because of the way that roads or sidewalks or whatever might be, as opposed to the straight line. But that's the easiest way that we have it. Otherwise, we'll be routing. You can imagine what that routing system would have to look like to be able to determine that. And then we do have an exception for that also. If, there's a hazard or there's like a canal in the way between there, we don't want, we can make exceptions for that if there's a hazard.
I had received a couple of calls from residents from Somerton about that issue.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 mile. At one point, it was 1 mile, right?
Used
Way
to be
back.
a mile and a half, right, Ron?
And then it was.
Elementary was a mile. We were a mile and a half.
So anyway, and I did brought this attention to Mr. Brianza's attention, and I believe the problem was solved. But the parent was like, well, I live a little bit close to 2 miles, but it's not close enough, and because they were thinking of, if I go around, it's going to be 1 mile, but if like a one straight shot line, it's much. And that's one thing that I remember you guys playing. So they were good. So that was But yeah, that issue that with the 2 mile is,
Yes. And I would just remind you, we're not obligated to provide transportation at all, except for our special needs students. So we are not required, right? We do, we obviously want to, it's in our best interest and our students to do that, but
Right.
we're not mandated by law to
there
do
a
that.
policy that says that,
There's a law that says that,
law?
yes.
But is it under our policy or no?
Well, these are our policies.
Yeah,
right
so
here.
it's federal law that we're required to follow. These are in addition to the state and federal that we're bound to.
Okay.
Not that it happens very often, but occasionally a student may lose their bus privileges. And because we're not required to transport, unfortunately, sometimes Director Shepherd has to make that decision along with the campus that this individual won't be able to ride the bus for a week or 10 days or whatever it may be, because it is a privilege. And students behave very, very well on the bus, but sometimes things happen.
Okay. Policy 3401 is our safety and emergency management system. We did really the only changes, very few changes to this area, but we did align it to be the same terminology as what our schools are used to hearing. So, emergency operations plan, right? EOP. Okay. I don't know why they put me in charge of talking about these things. So again, we changed the verbiage because it was a little different, and other school districts may use different language, and so we made that align with ours, what we're used to hearing and seeing. Yes.
This is off that, but is the reason we don't publish, I've been asked this twice, the reason we don't publish our plans is for safety, right? We don't wanna tell the bad guy what you're doing, right?
Bo, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Or, sorry, Director Gonzalez, I apologize.
Yes, Ms. Craddock, that is correct. So, for example, our EOPs will include evacuation routes or various sites that we just would not want to anybody outside of the folks that need to know that to have access to that information. And so, absent a court order, those plans are not subject to public inspection. That's my understanding.
That state statute says that they're exempt from records request as well. So
that is why, yes, ma'am. And our terminology is in alignment with the Arizona Department of Education and also Arizona Department of Emergency Management and Affairs. So they set forth our minimum requirements, and that includes the terminology and nomenclature that's used within our EOPs. So emergency operation plans, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question?
The last one, last but not least, is technology. And again, technology had very few changes. Actually, pretty much remains as recommended to reflect our appropriate use and expectations of technology in our district. So they had a very small area, even though they're a very big part and touch a lot of lives and a lot of things that we do. We get into more of the technology when we get into student use and appropriateness for that as well. That concludes my report, unless you have any other questions.
Does anybody have a question? Okay, I think we are good. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
I have a motion made by Christy, seconded by Carlos. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll be back here at 5:15.
Hey, we're gonna cover